This coming Sunday, it isn't actually today, but next Sunday, and I won't be here, so I'm doing this today, is the full moon of the constellation, the zodiac sign that we call in our culture Taurus. And in India they have another name and they have another symbol, but it's the full moon in Taurus, and it's not connected, so let's see what I can make happen here. The full moon in Taurus means that it's the anniversary of three different events.
Shine from the window. Oh, the window.
Is it the window or is it this light?
No, it's the window.
Okay, thank you.
Shine up.
It's amazing how that happens. There we go.
No,
Not all of
the
it.
other
From
side.
here?
One down for
All over.
All
All right.
There we go.
Not here.
I still see the window.
It's
Front door. That's the front door.
the one that doesn't.
You can
close
drop
all
the
way.
shade on the front door too, just under the clip.
Okay.
Bingo. Or turn off this light.
No, it's reflecting from a car.
Yeah, it's coming back. It's better.
That's the best we can do right now. She's going to undo all the clips.
I'll show you where it is.
So when we go to do the service on
Yeah.
YouTube, we probably can start a little later than normal. So, Beltane, full moon in the spring, all right?
There we go.
In Celtic tradition, but in the Buddhist tradition, something else is happening. It is a festival of light, and you notice our songs today were about light, and our reading today, the chalice lighting was perfect. And it's a festival of light because the Buddha, with his enlightenment, is bringing light to the world. And so it is said that approximately 600 BC, a baby was born, and there's wonderful magical tales about that, on the full moon that we know as Beltane, the full moon between the equinox and the solstice, the spring equinox and the summer solstice. And he was living in his palace, and he realized that that wasn't good enough. He went out into the world, discovered that there is pain and suffering, which his father had attempted to protect him from because, well, when he was born, there was a prophecy that he was going to run away and not be a king after all, and his father was trying to avoid that. It's amazing how that works, isn't it? And so he went off into the world, and he saw the suffering, and he said, I have to do something about this. And he realized that he had no idea how to do that. And he went off into the forest, and he discovered a group of ascetics, the sannyasin that wander around with mud and matted hair and so on. And he lived that extreme ascetic life. So he went from the prince with all the luxuries the world could provide to the extreme ascetic who would eat the occasional grain of rice that he had washed with dew or with rain that he had found that perhaps a bird had dropped in its droppings. I mean, that's kind of the food and the life that he was living. And he had joined this group, and they had become aware that he was a very powerful being, and they had sort of started to follow him, and there's again beautiful stories about that. And then one day, he saw a man in the river, on a boat. She wasn't here when Sally told her. He saw a man on a boat on the river, and the man was happy. The man was singing. He was content. He was in touch with life. And this young prince, who had been 5-6 years in the forest living on the very, very bottom of the scrapings of life, said, he's got something that I want. And he gave himself permission to break his ascetic vows, and he jumped into the river and got clean. And that really was the beginning of the Enlightenment, allowing himself to go into the river and be cleansed. And as he was sitting under a tree nearby that river, a young girl came by and saw that he was there and saw that he must be a holy man, and so she brought her, oh dear, That's on there, not on here. I don't know how to deal with that. And he saw that she was offering him something, and what he was offering was, what she was offering to him was some of her mother's rice pudding. Just rice and probably cooked in coconut milk and maybe a little bit of fruit or honey added to it. And he smelled it and he remembered the rice pudding of his childhood. And it was a delicious memory. It was a wonderful experience. And so he accepted her offering. It was the first food he'd had in 5 or 6 years. And he had a taste of it. And his whole being relaxed and felt part of the world and the flow and the interconnected life that is all that is. And in that moment, he achieved the great enlightenment. And then he was so profoundly affected by this combination of experiences that he sat there in deep meditation for what turned out to be 40 days and 40 nights, because that's what all spiritual tales tell us. And in that space of deep meditation, he experienced all of the issues of the world. And there are wonderful graphics of it. And then he touched the earth. The earth is my witness. What an appropriate thing on Earth Day, the day before. The earth is my witness. So when you see a Buddha sitting in meditation pose and his hand is down, it touching the earth is my witness. I am life. I am the all that is. And there is no evil, there is no suffering, there is nothing that we must fight against, ever. So out of that, he came to have a sense of what it was that he could share with other people, and that was why he was sitting there. He was going, all right, now I understand this, now what do I do with it? And he came to understand that there were 4 basic ideas. Excuse me. The translation of that first one is literally, no thing ever fully satisfies. It's not about suffering at all. It's about being attached to something, thinking it's going to give you everything you're looking for. But it can't. No person, no job, no item, no house, no location, no physical object can be, because it's not permanent. And when a Tibetan Buddhist prays, he has this bell in this hand, and he has a little brass thing called dorje that's called thunderbolt. Dorje means thunderbolt. Thunderbolt is power. Bell is impermanence. Impermanence. Nothing is permanent. How could it possibly fully satisfy us? And so the cessation of our craving or our attachment is the way to end being dissatisfied. If I'm not attached to something giving me everything I'm longing for, then I'm not going to be dissatisfied. And I'm not going to have the upset that we call suffering. And finally, the way to get there is what he called the Eightfold Noble Path. Now there's this word in here in English that is not what he meant. Another word that is not what he meant. It's not right or wrong. It's fitting. What is fitting? What is supportive of me and my intention to achieve freedom and liberation? These are the things that I choose in that direction. I choose, what it is that I am understanding. I'm not going to understand the things of the world because the things of the world are impermanent. I'm going to understand the eternals. My intention is going to be focused on what it is that I'm choosing here. And my choice to be free and liberated and at one with the all that is. And the speech that I use, this is like Don Miguel Ruiz, right? The Four Agreements. Let your speech be impeccable. Let your words be impeccable. Let everything that I say be in alignment. So if you think of right as being in alignment, then this begins to work. Okay? And then out of that he realized that some people needed to understand that this is because they've been operating on an assumption about the nature of life that isn't real. So there are the three characteristics of life. I have a friend who was a Buddhist. She was a Quaker and then she was a Buddhist and now she's a Quaker again. She said, I couldn't handle all those numbers. So we understand dissatisfaction because of the impermanence. And then there's this thing, the no unique self. Now, again, that is misunderstood by our English translation of what it is that he's attempting to get us to understand. He's saying we are part of the interconnected web. We are not isolated individuals. As I say, Wesak or Vesak is the festival of light. And what I'd like to do is let some of them do the talking. Are you okay with that? All right. So it'll be not very pretty here for a second while I get there.
Each year, during Wesak Day, Buddhists around the world observe the bathing the Buddha ceremonies to commemorate the birth, enlightenment, and nirvana of Sakyamuni Buddha. The great compassionate, enlightened, and world-honored teacher of sentient beings. During the ceremony, we sing the Bathing the Buddha hymn, and now bathe the Tathagata, purity, wisdom, majesty, and ocean of merit. May all beings purify themselves from defilements and attain the Tathagata's pure Dhammakaya, pure Dhammakaya, pure Dhammakaya. As we bathe the Buddha, we should remind ourselves to always maintain our pure awareness and cleanse our minds of all impure thoughts. When we have pure awareness, we will have brightness. With brightness, we unfold and develop the wisdom to make wise judgment and understand the consequences of our actions and behavior. Thus, we will be able to build a blissful family, achieve happiness, and lead a fulfilling and meaningful life. A life filled with bliss, wisdom, and happiness, not only for ourselves, but for others as well.
Sounds like a Unitarian to me.
Buddhism is one of the most ancient belief systems practiced by over 350 million people in the world.
So basically, Buddhism can be a philosophy and a religion because it teaches you a way of life.
Wesak Day, or also known as the Tri-Sacred Day, holds special significance for the millions of Buddhists who comprise a fifth of the world's total population.
A fifth of the population.
So Baba's argument is we must try our best not to do evil. We must try our best to do Achitta Parivodapana. We must cultivate ourselves. And this is all the Buddhas.
The goal of a Buddhist is to become a Buddha. The day Buddha became enlightened or reached nirvana is a day celebrated by Buddhists all over the world, is because that's what we wish to achieve.
This is his mother giving birth in the story. Isn't it great? The young prince in the palace, realizing it's not enough, getting his father's permission to ride out to the world, practicing asceticism.
Siddhartha sat in cultivation beneath the Bodhi tree. Alone, he confronted the tortuous assailants from Mara's evil rulers. The earth is my witness.
So it happens that on this day, the full moon of Beltane, not only was he born, not only did he achieve the enlightenment that he had not realized he was looking for, but it was what he was looking for. But after 49 years of wandering the country with a robe and a bowl, he accepted an offering of a meal that included tainted pork. And he knew it, but it was an offering, and it was his commitment to accept it. And he ate it, and he proceeded to enter into a very uncomfortable state that resulted in his leaving his body. There's another story about this one. One of the newer monks who was accustomed to having his way was working his way up to the front so he could be there, right next to the Buddha, as the Buddha is reclining on his couch. You may have seen statues of the Buddha reclining. And he's reclining and he looks at the monk and he says, "Come on, give everyone a chance. It's not every day a Buddha dies." So Vesak, Wesak, Wesak, whatever it's pronounced, depending on which of the many, many countries it's celebrated in, is the day of the trifold, the 3 anniversaries of this one person's life. But it's the day also that we honor the light of wisdom and understanding that comes with doing whatever it takes to accomplish that heart's desire of liberation, of freedom from the dissatisfactions and distress of the appearances of reality. Everything is impermanent. The world is not real in that sense. Maya means changing, evolving, plastic, malleable. What we're longing for is something that we can know is real forever. And that's what all of Buddhism is about. One of the teachings is called the Heart Sutra. It's a very powerful teaching. I brought a few books. This is a beautiful book on Tibetan Buddhist symbols, including the bell. That's just for you. The Dalai Lama's teachings, the essence of the Heart Sutra. And the Heart Sutra has very few lines, and is a marvelous teaching that again has some wonderful stories around it. But I'm going to read you an overview of what the Dalai Lama says. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma lays down the base structure of the Buddha's path. Dharma. Dharma is used for the word teaching, but it also means life purpose. And our Dharmakaya is our essential body that is not disconnected from all that is, that knows it is not disconnected, and is always feeling the power and the life and the light, and is generating our experience. So Dharma is expressed as a wheel with 4 stages. So the first turning of the wheel of Dharma lays down the basic structure of the Buddha's path to enlightenment. That is laying out the 4 noble truths. The second turning of the wheel, comprised principally of the perfection of wisdom texts, further elaborates on the next truth, the truth of cessation, of impermanence. So once we get, okay, life is not always satisfying, and it's my cravings and attachments that make it, so that I'm happy, I'm going to let go of those, I'm going to let go of those. Then I start realizing, oh my goodness, everything is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. This body is impermanent. These buildings are impermanent. And that's the second turning, the perfection of wisdom. Now there is a mantra that goes with that. It's called Gate Gate. Gate Gate. Param Sate Gate, Param Sa Gate, Bodhi Soha. The way the Dalai Lama interprets that, which is a little different from anyone that I've ever heard, he says, go now, go fully now into the enlightenment that is yours. Isn't that marvelous? As one's understanding of the ultimate nature of reality deepens, one begins to recognize more clearly the erroneous nature of one's belief in the existence that you've experienced. As the erroneous nature of this belief becomes increasingly evident, one's insight into the true nature of reality becomes deeper and clearer. In this way, we lay the foundation for the deeper understanding, for the subjective experience of what the Heart Sutra is all about, which is called emptiness. One of the issues that the Dalai Lama raises is if you've been taught that Buddhism is about emptiness, then it becomes nihilism, and that's not what it's about. Okay? If you've been taught that Buddhism is about Maya and the illusory nature of things, that's not what it's about either. So he suggests going through the 4 stages. Suzuki Roshi, David Suzuki, one of the important contributors of Buddhism in America, wrote a wonderful book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And the way I've used this concept, this book sits on my shelf, I almost never open it because the title is what I need. If I show up in a moment not bringing all my memories and knowledge to that moment, but as a beginner, then I've attained Zen mind. Okay. And one of the things that he says, that you have to be steadfast in the practice. And he says, at first you will have various problems, and it is necessary for you to make some effort to continue the practice. For the beginner, practice without effort is not true practice. For the beginner, the practice needs great effort, especially for young people. It is necessary to try very hard to achieve something. You must stretch out your arms and legs as wide as they will go. Form is form. You must be true to your own way until at last you come to the point where you see it is necessary to forget all about yourself. Until you come to this point, it is completely mistaken that whatever you are doing is Zen. Or that it does not matter whether you practice or not. But if you make your best effort just to continue your practice with your whole mind and body, without gaining ideas, then whatever you do will be true practice. When you do something, just to do it should be your purpose. Form is form, and you are you, and true emptiness becomes realized in your practice. Now, we have all had this experience. It's when we're in it, we don't know we're in it. We realize we've had it when we come out of it. I discovered that when I was teaching in the classroom, the teaching would be, I wasn't there anymore. Yes. I discovered that when I'm doing certain forms of art or music or gardening, the gardening is all that's happening, or the music is all that's happening. I'm not there. That's Zen. When the doing, the being, the unfolding is what's happening and we are not present to it. That is the no self, the emptiness that the Heart Sutra is telling us. And that is the earliest stages of enlightenment and the beginning of nirvana, heaven on earth. That is what Vesak is reminding us. Thank you.